When I first saw the trailer for Seaspiracy, I thought it was really interesting, but because I was busy, I didn't have time to watch it and it slipped from my mind. However, I was reminded of it when an interesting article showed up in my newsfeed. The article stated that while the film had tried to bring to light the horrors of the fishing industry, it also used its dramatization and some outdated information to spread vegan propaganda. This piqued my intrigue, so I sat down to watch it, and soon I became terrified. If all the statistics were true, then we're all doomed. There's no way all these species won't go extinct, because if I know one thing about corporations is that they won't stop until all the money is gone. Then I paused the movie, and I decided to start writing the script, which I had originally decided to make about how good the documentary was, until I decided to look for the article that had reignited my interest. And instead of finding that, I just found a lot of other articles saying how the movie was showcasing certain things in a biased view or was showing them without proper context. And at first I thought that the news was paid off by the fishing industry. So I went back to finishing the movie script and the movie itself, and then I would review all its claims against the articles, and then I would write how the article's claims were wrong. But once I had finished finishing the documentary, there was something that I, myself, a person who was largely uneducated about the fishing industry, knew was false. And this was a claim made in the documentary that there is no way sustainable fishing can exist. A claim which, if I may, and please do excuse my language, is pure and utter. I know this because of a very, very large business known as ocean farming. Ocean farming, if done right, is an extremely good thing because instead of taking wild fish, wild plants from the ocean, damaging ecosystems, ocean farms are just that, farms for sea products, such as seaweed. And fish farming, a confusing concept for many, as it really requires more than a quick Google search to fully understand. You see, when fishing in the wild, you simply pick up fish. Lots of fish. Thousands upon thousands of fish per net can be caught. And to catch so much fish at once, these nets have to be big, and have to catch fish at places where fish congregate. This is also where predators come to hunt fish. Ergo, bycatch. The documentary, the topic of the video, I wouldn't blame you if you forgot by this point that the documentary was the point of this video, actually states very correct information about this, and its impacts are very bad. So fish farms avoid this issue by having the fish in an environment where they are the only things for people to catch. However, many people are worried about fish farms, and this isn't without reason, as many fish farms will attempt to increase fish populations in their farms by astronomical amounts, so they can make more money. This, however, has dire consequences. This is a fish farm from the Philippines. You might be thinking, if that's a fish farm, then why does it look more like Shrek's swamp? That's because it attempted to overproduce fish. More fish means more nutrients for the fish to eat. More nutrients means more algae, and more algae means less oxygen, which means less oxygen, which means no fish, and no fish means there was no purpose to anything that was just done in this fish farm. Sometimes, to keep fish alive, farmers will use antibiotics and pesticides, which in the United States are illegal. And in a study done in 2006 and 2007, the FDA, short for the Food and Drug Administration, found that in a shipment from unhealthily farmed fish contained numerous illegal carcinogens. But don't lose hope, because there's a new type of fish farm, a more expensive one, but much better. A fish farm that is on land. This means that no damage to the ecosystem can be done because there's no ecosystem to damage. It does take much, much more resources, and as I said, is very expensive. But seeing as fisheries around the world annually make $246 billion a year, and if proper incentives are given, then I think most fisheries will switch over. And yes, I do know that not all fisheries make $246 billion a year, but even if small fisheries, small being relative, like Bill Martin here, can afford and sustain one, then I think big fishing companies can as well. Another thing the documentary claims is that by 2048, the oceans will be virtually empty. Now this is a direct quote from the creator of the documentary, Ali Tabrizi. If current fishing trends continue, we will see virtually empty oceans by the year 2048. Now this claim comes from a New York Times article written in 2006 that was based off a study that came out the same year. If you want to read the article, its name is Study Sees Global Collapse of Fish Species. I'll also put it in the description for you to read after the video. In fact, in an article done by Inverse, also included below in the description, many people who were interviewed said that their words were taken out of context. The people who somewhat agreed with the message of the documentary felt that what they said in the documentary was no longer accurate because of the way it was shown. And many scientists say that the documentary was making false and inaccurate and misleading claims, with scientist Price D. Stewart saying that the claim made by Mr. Tabrizi that sustainable fishing doesn't exist. In a direct quote, he states, "The biggest error is to say sustainable fishing doesn't exist. This is like saying sustainable agriculture doesn't exist." Another thing the movie does, which I myself find personally egregious, is the defense and promotion of the organization known as the Sea Shepherds. Now, at first, the Sea Shepherds were fine to me. They go around the ocean and help animals stuck in nets and similar things. Until I heard that they would sink whaling ships, illegal fishing ships, and have rammed 5 other ships. Okay, that doesn't sound like an organization that is trying its best to help sea wildlife by sailing around the world. That sounds like a group of eco-terrorists that have assaulted people. Help animals in the ocean, sure. That's completely fine. And if you can do something to help an animal, you should do that.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
They're doing their part.
Are you?
If you have the capability and the training too, well, that's even better. If you see a turtle stuck in a fishing net, cut the net, that's fine. Cut the net. But don't take on anything you know you can't, like beached whales. You will not be able to help a beached whale. If you see a beached whale, do contact the authorities. And definitely do not ram boats. The documentary specifically says, and rammed 5 other vessels. That means the rammed vessels were separate from the whaling ships and illegal fishing ships. And then they say that they've done this without killing a single person, which, can you guess, is actually true, surprisingly. Now, they did accidentally ram a fishing boat and kill a Mexican fisherman when their ship was attacked by Molotov-throwing illegal fishers while they were working for the Mexican government. So this organization isn't all bad. But if you can work with governments of countries to help animals legally, and you have been helping animals in the ocean legally, I don't understand why they would do illegal things as well. However, the founder, Paul Watson, and all American members are prohibited by the United States courts to interfere with Japanese fishing and whaling boats, even if they are seen doing illegal activities such as whaling. And after some research, and by research I mean just Googling, I found out that the Sea Shepherds will no longer pursue Japanese whaling ships after the court order by the United States that I mentioned earlier. I think this organization is very much in the morally gray, but they are very much trying to do something good, even if sometimes that good is done in a not-so-legal way. Another claim they make is that the big wildlife protection organizations are deliberately not speaking out against the damages fishing, and specifically trawling, does to the environment. And they show a bunch of big-name organizations that most people recognize, and they say that they're being silent. So I googled, which wildlife protection organizations are ocean and marine life protectors? And one of them was the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund. They, in the article, state that among the WWF's main priorities in the area of marine conservation is working with fishers, fishing companies, and scientists around the globe to understand and meet sustainability standards. Now, can you guess what logo in this flashy fade-in of apparently silent organizations included? Oh yeah, the WWF. Now I was thinking, maybe we're just saying all these things and doing all these things, and the WWF isn't actually doing anything, they're just stealing money from donations. So I researched further, going to the WWF's own website and clicking on their Protecting Oceans section. If you wish to know how to get there, I'll put up a video now. And in that section of the ocean, the WWF writes that some of the dangers to the ocean are overexploitation of fish and other resources, destructive fishing, unregulated development, pollution, and climate change. All these things that the documentary is also talking about, and the documentary says all these things are a problem and no one else is talking about them?
Where are the big environment groups? They are deliberately not engaging with the most important issue of all.
It's not even hard to find this information, so who the heck do they think they're gonna be fooling? I just googled wildlife organizations that have spoken out against ocean damage, and I found this information. It took me less than 5 minutes. After this point, they talk about marine protected areas. They state that most scientists agree that 30% of the ocean should be protected, but only 5% is actually protected. But it's less than 1% because those protected areas still allow fishing. Then they show an interview with no context. The audio of the interview doesn't even play. They're the ones saying what the interviewers are saying and what the interviewee is saying. And they don't even say what government official is saying or what country they belong to. It's just one of the government officials was interviewed and asked, like, which government? Which official? Which country? Why are they making it as difficult as possible to check their information? And when the false information comes out, people say that sustainable fishing doesn't exist and that it can't exist, with one unnamed woman saying she looked long and hard and found none, that it's impossible. Well, I googled it and I found it in 5 to 10 minutes, so maybe you should look harder, you troglodyte! What these people are saying is halting progress. By spreading false information, they are making it harder for people to properly educate themselves and only helps fuel their agenda, make them money, and increase the world population's panic. Because heaven forbid we let people try to save the planet while not forcing people to change their diets and getting rid of millions of jobs, of which most are not illegal. Let me say this. If you want to go vegan, that's fine. There are lots of positives that come with it and a lot of negatives as well. But just because I don't want to go vegan doesn't mean you can't. But what most people and what most vegans hate is people like this.
What's your favorite candy?
Most candies without gelatin in it.
Name one.
Nerds, Sour
Nate,
Patch
just name
Kids.
one.
Sour Patch Kids.
Okay, those aren't vegan.
This morning I had buckwheat hot cereal. Add almond milk and some water.
Okay. Who eats buckwheat in the morning? Like, I know.
People who try and make you feel bad for eating meat. Looking at the history of Tabrizi's former work, and it becomes much clearer to why this vegan narrative was included. In 2018, Tabrizi was a film director for the movie Vegan, which according to its reviews was apparently a pretty good documentary. And while the score on IMDb is higher for Seaspiracy, some of the reviews are But I'm very conflicted because on one hand, a lot of things in this documentary are taken out of context, are exaggerated, or are just not true. But some things are. It's not a 100% fake drama documentary at all, which is so confusing to me, because if you have all these resources, all these people who are supporting you, then why do you have to mislead people? I can somewhat understand it. All these previous actions have been done, and yet Nothing has really happened to help solve the issue. But is spreading terror to the populace an effective way of helping this issue either? And to say that doing small things like not using plastic straws is virtually useless because of how little they account for, and that plastic straws do account for very little amount of plastic waste, that is true. But to tell people that because they account for so little, it hardly matters whether or not they are no longer used is counterproductive. Because not everyone can go out and clean the ocean of fishing nets and other garbage, but anyone can stop using non-reusable plastics such as straws or plastic water bottles. But what did the documentary get right? Now, one thing they say is that discarded nets and equipment accounts for 50% in one Pacific Ocean. Again, this is true but misleading. Nets and equipment and buoys and whatnot are big and thick, but most importantly they are very buoyant because of these things. They all break apart slower and they stay at the top of the ocean for longer, while small plastics can break down quicker and can't stay afloat for as long. Of course, this misleading claim does highlight the facts that nets are extremely damaging to sea animals, so, I'll let it pass. Claim number 2 is that microorganisms consume 4 times more CO2 than the Amazon rainforest, and this claim is correct, 100% correct. In fact, some scientists say that this number is lower than in actuality because, well, the science is really cool. Certain phytoplankton can absorb CO2 better than some others, and that there is an annual spring boom of phytoplankton. When phytoplankton die, they float to the bottom of the ocean and store the CO2 they absorbed there. Something interesting, which I didn't really think about myself, was how in the documentary all the interviewed people are mostly white or from the West, which is odd to me because most fish imports actually come from Asia. There was no diversity to the people who were asked at all, because the environment of these two places of the West and Asia are completely different from one another. And not even just Asia versus the West. Just asking majority, a lot of white people were involved with the documentary, and that's really weird, because if you ask the same kind of people a question, you're mostly going to get the same answer. For example, I live in Canada, and when the settlers first arrived to where is now Canada, they met the Aboriginal peoples, and these Aboriginals lived off the land by hunting and fishing and so on of these things. So when the government tried to apologize for the horrible and disgusting mistreatment of the Aboriginals, one of the things was to let them fish all year, even outside of fishing season, and without a permit, I believe. It would be really interesting to hear their opinions on it. But I think the reason they weren't interviewed was either Tabrizi is from England and perhaps couldn't be bothered to travel to Canada and find someone willing to be interviewed, a flimsy excuse seeing he traveled all the way to China and Asia, Japan. But let's give the benefit of the doubt here. Or the filming crew knew that most likely they wouldn't go 100% agreeing to what he was saying and what the message of the film was, so why bother? So if this documentary is somewhat agenda-pushing, factually misleading, and possibly progress-halting garbage pile of dramatic over-editing, then what alternative is there? Well, there's always any documentary that has David Attenborough in it, and a personal favorite of mine, Troubled Waters, which is a documentary about the impacts of overfishing. There's a lot of stuff in this video that I didn't cover, because if I did, we would be here for 10 to 15 more minutes, and I don't want to be here for 10 to 15 more minutes. And honestly, we don't really need to be. If you want to watch a documentary, then watch it. I don't care. But don't blindly consume what people tell you to, because it's professional and has good editing and is on a professional website like Netflix. Be mindful. But what do you think about the movie? Do leave your thoughts down in the comments below and consider subscribing. I have all kinds of videos like stop motion, science, Star Wars, and very soon some more review videos. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you later.